Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Mr. Ideroli here with yet again another tutorial, this one for outlining characteristics of a colonial government. We are still on the development of American government. I'm going to continue on. We finished up with page 2 of the handout. We're moving on to page 3 of the handout, top of page 3. I split this one in half because it would have ran really long. I wanted to try to keep them shorter. Okay, so we're on development of American government, page 3. Once again, just to point out the things we're using here, I'm still using these during reading strategies. I'm looking around, I'm wondering if people are doing this. I'd really like you to do this before you actually move ahead. I'd like this to become part of the way you read, making those connections. You'll know I've been doing that a lot. This reading, I can make a lot of connections. We've talked a lot about this before. So we're coming back to what I call old ground. Now we're going to get a little deeper into the governments of these different groups now. But this is old ground, so we should know what we're doing here. Of course, we are interacting with text. We're looking for main ideas and supporting details. I do look for things like our historical inferences as we go along. It's cause and effect, compare, contraster here. You can also consider, is there a problem? What was their solution? Is there a question being answered? What's the sequence of events that are occurring here? These are things I'm trying to keep in mind as I go along. Okay, so hey, let's move on. Clarify understanding. Using photographs, charts, other graphics to help me understand what I'm reading. That's easy to do with this one. I've thrown in plenty of captions, and you can connect the captions with the reading as you go along. We're also using those after reading strategies. Obviously, we're still recalling with our summary. At the end, we'll respond by completing the reflection activity at the end. Drawing logical conclusions, forming opinions. And, actually we will do this in the sense that we are going to do another document analysis activity where you'll have to annotate and analyze. We're also going to write something in response. So we'll be doing an evaluation of something we're going to talk about right now. So again, this strategy is more often used with document analysis than textbook reading. However, you will be using this reading to complete a doc analysis. So it's something to keep in mind. And we're actually going to talk about that topic right now. Okay, summarizing with rule-based skills. Now, some of you are saying you don't know how to do this, and maybe this is my fault for providing these tutorials and making you more dependent upon them, but I do want you to actually start outlining and summarizing without the tutorial. In fact, you'll notice I've kind of withheld these. That's not me being rude. It's me teaching you how to outline on your own. It's like swimming. You go swimming, they'll hold you, they'll put a life preserver on you. You'll learn that way, but ultimately the goal is to take off that life preserver and swim independently. Summarizing is basically the same thing. I've been trying to guide you in the right direction, show you how to do things, provide you with a little support for the background, to help you out. A crutch, it's a crutch, but then I want you to eventually take ownership of this skill and do it on your own. Then you've learned, and that's really what we're trying to do here. So when you do this, you want to delete some information. And notice how I do that, how I chunk the sentences into small phrases rather than trying to write whole sentences out. I've been trying to do that. Sometimes I substitute, where I'll actually change the whole way the paragraph is formatted and do my own summary of it. That's a pretty developed skill. That's something that takes a little thinking. You got to really look at the paragraph and go, actually, these are the important things. I'm going to put it in this order. And that's substitute. And obviously you want to keep the most important information. And we are doing this in the outline format. I don't think there's any secret about this now, right? We're looking at topics, subtopics, paragraphs. You're reading paragraph by paragraph when you do this on your own. So do keep that in mind. And you'll notice I've been trying to do that in these presentations as well. Moving on. And please listen to these things because I am giving you some ideas out. Okay, so we're on Pilgrims and the Puritans still, and the development of American government. I am moving on to another subtopic, though. I finished up at page 2. I'm moving to page 3. And obviously, A was government in Jamestown. B was settling in New England, the Pilgrims and Puritans. Now we're moving on to government in New England, the Pilgrims and Puritans. Now we did a kind of setting the stage with the first subtopic, or actually the second subtopic here with B. Now at C, we're going to get into actually what their governments look like. Okay, and again, make a prediction here. They should look something like what happened in England. Do they try to copy or to borrow from those traditions from which they come from? So let's take a look at that and let's get right into the first paragraph here. Right, so I'm on top of page 3, and it says, knowing they're in a land without English government, the Pilgrims formed their own. They create a written agreement called the Mayflower Compact. which all the men signed. They agreed to choose leaders and make their own laws, promising to obey them. This compact led to the founding of Plymouth. I'll tell you, when I read this paragraph, the thing that keeps flying through my head is the idea of a written constitution. We talked about this. Now, the English did not have a written constitution, but it is interesting that the Pilgrims felt the need to put what they were going to do in writing. So I'm making a connection, right? There's problem solution here too. They don't have a government. Remember, they were supposed to land in Virginia and be under the Virginia Charter. That was going to be basically their constitution. They were going to follow the principles established in the Virginia Charter. They're not in Virginia. They need to have their own laws before they land. So the solution was the Mayflower Compact, which they would all agree to sign and all agree to follow. I'm also thinking of, hey, a contract. This reminds me of the Magna Carta. Okay, now look at all the things that are going through my head as I'm reading. When you read, this is how you engage with nonfiction text. You want to consider how this relates to what you already know. You want to consider what problems being resolved here. So even before I summarized, all this went through my head. How do I summarize this first paragraph? No government. They're in land with no government. Form their own. Written agreement. Mayflower Compact. All men sign. Chose leaders. Obey laws. Found Plymouth. Those are the important things I should have in my summary. So what did I say here? Knew there was no govern. Notice how I shortened government. Pilgrim. I could have just said Pilgrim form. I did. I said Pilgrims formed own. Notice that's not a sentence. I could have said Pilgrims formed their own government. I didn't. It's kind of like caveman talk, right? Pilgrims form own. Mayflower Compact. Now, if you notice, that put me right to the middle of the paragraph already. Men signed it. Chose leaders to make laws. Led to founding of Plymouth. Okay, I could have said obey laws, but I felt like that was built in with the whole men signed it and choose to obey laws. Okay, or chose leaders to make laws. Okay, so there you go. That's what I had for my summary. If you had said something about obeying laws, you're okay too. Okay, if you did this on your own, that's good. Okay, don't change anything. You're good. Paragraph 1 is done. Let's go to paragraph 2. Okay, and again, I'm still on page 3. Okay. The Mayflower Compact established a direct democracy in the colonial America, where people held town meetings to discuss issues and make decisions. Anyone could attend, but only male members could vote. This tradition of town meetings continues in New England today. When I read this, 2 things ran through my head. The first was ancient Athens. This reminds me of ancient Athens, which had a direct democracy, where the male citizens voted. That's kind of interesting, right? I mean, a direct connection to the past. So there's a little continuity going on here to boot, right? I can just see that. What this also reminds me of is, maybe you guys don't watch it, but like when I watch politicians during election season, they hold town meetings. There's a little historical relevance here. You'll know I use these historical inferences a lot when I'm reading. But yeah, I've seen town meetings on TV. So this concept of a town meeting, I bet that actually came from this time period. And that's how we use it today, as these town meetings on TV. Just interesting thing to note. So how did I summarize this? Okay, Mayflower Compact, direct democracy, colonial America. Held town meetings, discuss issues, / make decisions. All could attend, only males could vote. Influenced town meetings in New England today. I mean, those were the important points. Let's see if I hit them. Okay, Mayflower Compact, created direct democracy in America. Town meetings used to debate, make decisions. I really simplified that. All could attend, males vote. Still a tradition in New England. Look how I shortened New England today. I'm done with paragraph 2. And notice some of these paragraphs, that was a really short paragraph, but it had a lot of information in it. Okay, so that's how the separatists, the Pilgrims, worked out a form of government. They actually create this direct democracy under the Mayflower Compact. And they agree to have this democracy. Now, in fact, this is the document you're going to analyze later on. So do keep in mind, you're going to come back to this one, and if you need background information, certainly, Roman numeral 2, B and C, you might want to return here for your background information. It's right here. This is the Mayflower Compact, by the way. Here's the excerpts of it. This is what you're going to have to look at later. The loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord King James. our King James, they call him Dread Sovereign Lord. It's kind of creepy, right? By the grace of God of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith, right? And beyond, I mean, that's what that kind of means right there, right? Etc. Okay, having undertaken for the glory of God the advancement of the Christian faith and the honor of our king and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia. That's a mouthful. If you're wondering what he's saying, what they're saying there is that, hey, to spread Christianity and to honor the king and increase the size and scope of the empire, we took on this attempt to settle in the northern parts of Virginia, right? Do by these presents, the people who are there, solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and one another, covenant in agreement and combine ourselves into a civil body politic. That's an interesting line. It's basically saying there that all here present are agreeing in God's, as God is our witness, to have this agreement to form a political body. They're forming their own government. That's literally in the face of God, you know, and with everyone present, who they're going to form their own government for our better ordering and preservation, for our survival, and furtherance of ends aforesaid. That kind of means like to further their way of life, and by the virtue do enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices from time to time, as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony. That just means they're going to make laws for the good of the people, in case you're wondering what that means. Unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. They're going to agree to these laws no matter what. In witness whereof we have hereunto subscribed our names at Cape Cod on the 11th November in the reign of our sovereign Lord King James of England, France, and Ireland, the 18th of Scotland, the 44th, okay, Anno Domini, which means in the year of our Lord, 1620. Now, what does that thing after witness mean? That's just when they did it. Where they signed it and what year. Okay, that's a heck of a way of saying it, but that's all that means. You know, hey, here on the 11th of November, in the name of King James, who's the king of both England and Ireland, France and Scotland, right, 1620, we're establishing this compact. That's basically what they're saying. So I wanted to kind of interpret that document for you here before we moved on, because we will come back to this one and look at it. So, hey, moving on. We're done with the Pilgrims here. We're kind of moving on to the Puritans. In case you didn't notice, you look at paragraph 3. Paragraph 3, those are the Puritans. So what did they do? What was their government like? One paragraph on these. The Puritans also established representation, though it was limited at first. In 1629, the Massachusetts Bay Colony's charter only allowed stockholders to control the government. The charter also gave the colony's governor too much power, which upset the colonists. By 1634, the colony's leaders allowed freemen, or church members, to choose representatives from each town to make laws, leading to the creation of the General Court in 1644. Two law-making bodies, the Council of Assistants and the House of Deputies, made up the General Court. However, it limited participation to members of the Puritan Church. So that's interesting. I see a problem solution here when I'm reading this. And the problem was the governor had too much power. And we know how the English feel about this. I mean, we're not to the Bill of Rights yet. We're not to the Glorious Revolution yet. But this is 1629. This was a time in England when people were challenging the power of Charles I. If you forgot, this is around the time of the English Civil War, right? So the idea of like one person holding too much power, and this is historical context. This is in the minds of the people. They don't want one person holding all this power, and they don't like the idea of the power being controlled by just a select few. You know, those stockholders, right? That's not good as far as the people are concerned. And remember, these people are working hard to create a colony, and they feel like they're doing all this hard work, but they're not being recognized, and they want recognition. So this is going to lead the Puritans to have to form their own government. They're going to have to form what's called the General Court. That's their solution. I find it interesting here, and again, continuity, two lawmaking bodies, the Council of Assistants and the House of Deputies, which kind of reminds me of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. So again, we're seeing some continuity in the way these English settlers basically mimic what's going on in Britain at the time. In England, it's still called England technically, okay, that they're mimicking that. and they're copying that type of government system for their own government. So let's see how we did this. I mean, how did I summarize this? Puritans established a representative government, limited it first. 1629, Mass-Bay's charter, only stockholders control government. Governor, too much power. Colonists upset. 1634, what did they do? Establish rep government, general court. Two bodies, council assistants / house deputies. Limited to church members. I just kind of ran through the paragraph real quick and I looked at the important stuff. So how did I do it? So Puritans established I could have just said established rep government. Limited, right? I could have just said, but limited it first. A was 1629, Mass-Bay's charter, only stockholders control government. I kind of said that. B, gave governor too much power, upset colonists. 1634, allowed freemen, church members to choose reps, make laws, created general court. 1644. Then two lawmaking bodies, council assistants, council of deputies, limited to Puritan church members. This was a little long, but there's a lot packed into that one paragraph. And that's why it took me a while to do that. Okay, so there you go. We kind of wrapped up the Puritans. Interesting that the Puritans create a form of government that almost mimics, to a T, the English government, where you have a governor who acts on behalf of the king, and you have a smaller body of people called the Council of Assistants, and then a House of Deputies, and they're all representatives. So we have a representative democracy here, right? Almost like a republic, but there is a king in England, so we can't technically call it a republic, okay? But we almost have a representative type of democracy here when we look at what happened with the Puritans, different from the Pilgrims, who had a direct democracy. Interesting, right? So, hey, we're good. We have 3 more paragraphs to go. Let's move on to those. And now we're going to take a look at government New England dissenting colonies. Now, we did talk about this a little, so there's going to be a lot of making connections here. And we'll jump right into it. So this is D, government New England, dissenting colonies. Okay, let's get to it. So the Puritans were dissenters, meaning they opposed common beliefs. While they sought freedom to worship, they did not allow others to do the same. This led to new colonies based on religious freedom or religious tolerance. Now that's interesting. So these Puritans who were persecuted, when they got here, they persecuted people who didn't believe in them. That's kind of hypocritical. Okay, so I'm kind of making a connection there, and I'm kind of making an emotional connection. I mean, how many people in our lives, what's that old saying? Do what I say, not what I do. And when people do that to us, we often do not like them. So Puritans, dissenters, opposed beliefs, sought freedom to worship, did not allow others to do that. Okay, led to colonies based on religious freedom, religious tolerance. I might have a bit here. Puritans were dissenters, sought freedom to worship, but did not allow others to do the same. Led to new colonies based on religious freedom and tolerance. Done. Paragraph 2. Hey, again, anytime I'm going too fast, pause the video. Okay, so next paragraph, we're almost there. Some who were forced out of Massachusetts founded Rhode Island and Connecticut. Thomas Hooker, a Puritan minister, disagreed with John Winthrop, the powerful Massachusetts governor. Hooker broke away from Massachusetts Bay Colony and formed Connecticut. In 1639, Connecticut created America's first written constitution, called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. This document allowed colonists to elect representatives and make laws. I'm getting 2 things out of that. First, I'm clarifying. There's a picture of John Winthrop on page 3, and it says the first governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony. Believed the Puritans were on a holy mission to build a city upon a hill, a Christian community that others would look to as the perfect society. However, Winthrop also created dissent and division in his community by ruling with an iron fist over the entire colony. So this is the guy that Hooker wanted to get away from. The other thing I'm noticing, another representative government, this time in Connecticut. So how did I summarize this? Some forced out of Massachusetts, founded Rhode Island, Connecticut. Hooker, Puritan minister, disagreed with Winthrop. I'm not going to use their first names. Powerful Mass governor, broke away from Massachusetts Bay, formed Connecticut. 1639, creates America's, what did he say? 1639, Connecticut, which I might call Con. America's first written constitution, Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Elect representatives, make laws. This is a little long, but there's a lot in this paragraph. So some forced out of Massachusetts, established Rhode Island and Connecticut. Thomas Hooker, Puritan minister, disagrees with Massachusetts Governor Winthrop, broke away. Massachusetts Bay, formed Connecticut. I use the abbreviation for Connecticut. Create written constitution. Fundamental orders of Connecticut. Colonists elect reps, make laws. Done. Last paragraph. Another dissenter, Roger Williams, also disagreed with John Winthrop, and the General Court banished Williams from the colony in 1635. Williams founded the colony of Rhode Island in 1636. Williams not only purchased land from the local Narragansett people, a policy rejected by Puritan leaders, he also adopted religious toleration, the acceptance of respect for religious views of others within the community. Okay, there's a picture of Roger Williams and Thomas Hooker on page 3 if you want to look. Okay, but there was an issue about purchasing lands from natives, and the Puritans disagreed with him. Also, Roger Williams didn't believe everything that Winthrop believed. So there was a disagreement between the two men. And this led to, hey, cause and effect, this led Roger Williams to form his own colony. So what did I summarize here? And I'm going to get right to this one to wrap it up. Other dissenter, Roger Williams, disagreed with Winthrop, banished by General Court 1635, founded Rhode Island 1636. Purchased Narragansett lands, adopted religious toleration, accepted and respected religious views of others in the community. And yes, Roger Williams is probably one of the people that had an impact on our First Amendment rights to freedom of religion. So we can see that that idea was ingrained very early on in America, even within the context of government. This idea that government should not tell people how to worship. And we see Roger Williams as one of the pioneers who did that. Hey, this ends this section. This is the third video. I'll make the fourth one on characteristics of American government next. So I'll see you there. And hey, have a nice day. Enjoy.